For some of us, the key part of the Easter long weekend is the food. Hot cross buns and pickled fish have been even more synonymous with the holiday. But let's talk about the history and why this has become so synonymous with this event. And I'm joined by historian Dr Vashna Jagarnath and chef Liziwe Matloha. Vashna, I'm going to start with you, but I can tell you that I've got the beautiful tangy sort of aroma of pickled fish on my desk this morning. Unfortunately, we don't have a jib, so we can't show our viewers that. And some beautifully appointed hot cross buns are standing by. How did it come to be in South Africa, so much a part of our food culture?
Well, I think, the story of pickled fish and smoked fish is part of the human culture for a very long time. It goes back, really deep into our history, especially tied to our roots of immigration and to communities that immigrate a lot. And in South Africa in particular, it was obviously came to us through the whole imperial moment of colonialism, when a lot of smoked and pickled fishes were used by travelers, by people who were coming through and bringing it to different parts of the world so that they could have a healthy protein on the long ship voyages. So obviously in South Africa, what ended up happening is the amalgamation of various groups of people that entered into what was then the Western Cape, or the Cape Colony, and today the Western Cape, came together and developed this really amazing dish out of ingenuity, out of necessity, because you could preserve the fish for a really long time, similarly to how we have smoked snook and salted snook coming out of the Western Cape. And they used a lot of spices. And the spices, once again, was part of that colonial moment of exploration, of trying to get to spices to trade with each other. And that becomes the central basis for the building of this pickled fish. And obviously, fish is tied to the Christian holiday and to various fast observances. And breaking fast with fish, especially your Lenten fast, was important. So that's how it becomes a part of our culture.
And it's that intersection I'm also interested in from a historical and cultural perspective, that it begins with one very specific type of culture and then becoming synonymous with another religious holiday, two religions, the Islamic traditions and religions and the Christian religions, celebrating around one food source.
Absolutely. And, smoked fish and pickled fish also, the tradition is very tied to Judaism and to the Jewish communities, because they obviously were a migrant community that did a lot of travel in the ancient world. Even in the modern world, we understand this to be the case. So it's really a reflection of, interestingly enough, the region out of which the holiday we are celebrating arises out of, which is the Middle East, which is today Palestine. And it is the part of the world where you have these three major religions really quite strongly, and those food influences. And interestingly enough, it ties in with Malaysia, with a lot of the Malaysian slaves and Indonesian slaves coming through, with quite a few of the spices, the use of things like cloves and peppercorns and cinnamon and all of those things in the dishes as well.
Now, I can tell you, Vashna and Liziwe, who's sitting with me in the studio, that I grew up in KwaZulu-Natal, and I'm at the intersection also of three different cultures, sort of African traditional cultures, Indian, and what we would term colored and mixed cultures here in South Africa. I made my pickled fish last night, but I added curry powder and chilies and all sorts of other things. So, Liziwe, for the uninitiated, those who've never made this, thought might even sound a little bit repulsive, pickle and fish. Mm-hmm. Share with us the recipe first, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how things change, between cultures.
Yes. With this recipe, I will always vouch for simplicity and budget-friendly recipes. So with this recipe, I also use like a mild curry, and it's just maybe about 500 grams of fish. And to pickle it, we used curry, turmeric, peppercorns, some lemon leaves. You cook that down, and then...
And bay leaves? Are they the same as lemon leaves?
No. You want a little bit of that lemony flavor to the pickle. It gives it a beautiful complement. And then, of course, we pickle that with vinegar. Lots of vinegar goes in, and sugar to pickle. And then you have it. You can upgrade it with a lot of spices that you would love to have. More masala if you want to have, but I keep it simple. Yeah. I really keep it simple.
Okay. Can I quickly venture to give you my 30-second recipe?
Yes.
So you saute the fish with I normally
with
do it
oil,
with curry
yes.
powders,
Yes.
with curry powders, with garlic, with some salt and pepper.
Yes.
And you deep fry that, you take it up. My mother always said, put the onions in the same pan. And you saute those onions down with peppercorns and bay leaves and
Yes.
some of the other spices. You throw in your turmeric and you throw in a bit of curry powder.
Yes.
When those onions have sweated down really well, that's when you throw in about half a cup of vinegar.
Absolutely, Mom is
And
right.
then you reduce that,
Yes.
and then you maybe sprinkle in a little bit of sugar just to take some of the acidity away. How am I doing?
No, it's beautiful. I love it. It's not that far off from the recipe that I've used. I just want to make recipes that are easy for everyone.
Yeah.
And then you can take it from there and build it and make it your own. So I will guide you with the small basics, and then you can grow from there. But the recipe is amazing. It's basically a traditional pickled fish.
So let's talk then about, and Vashna, maybe we bring you in, the history of the hot cross bun.
Well, the history of the hot cross bun is really interesting. I mean, it first makes its early appearance about 500 years ago in England, not in all parts of Europe, in England in particular. And what's so interesting about this is that it would make its appearance around 500 years ago, because around 600-700 years ago, you had the sort of crusades happening in Europe into the Middle East. And that's a moment where, yes, they always knew about spices, but spices become quite predominant, quite popular within Europe and in places like England and so on, and people are using it to spice their food. So they create this sort of dish with which has dried fruit in it, which is a very Middle Eastern technology of preserving fruit. So you have dried raisins, so that comes from the Middle East, and a lot of the spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, and then there's sometimes ginger. I know the Woolies spicy ones have a lot of spices in them, and that all comes into being to make this really delicious cake, bun. And it was actually very interesting because for a lot of parts of history and its existence, it's actually been banished because it was seen, especially in England, to be something quite full of excess. And especially when England went through the Reformation and the Anglican Church was born, and you had much more sort of Protestant and puritanical versions of Christianity that had developed and had been in control of England, then you had the absolute banishment of things like the hot cross buns and obviously things like mince pies and so on. So that was attached to the Catholic Church and seen as too much of excess. And obviously we have the cross on the hot cross bun, which symbolizes, Christ being crucified on the cross. But it's really a sort of bun that tells the story of early sort of networks within the world of trade, of conquest, of people coming together and learning from each other. And it also, I think, comes to symbolize the ways in which something that we can identify with one particular holiday or becomes synonymous with one holiday actually has roots that are much more, dispersed into society, that it has these like tentacles that spread across the Middle East and Europe and parts of Africa and Asia. And I really like that story. I really like that because it shows we are not as cut off from each other as we like to feel.
Yeah.
And this whole global world and us, this fusion food that people talk about a lot is not a modern thing, but it's been happening ever since different cultures and communities interact and meet with each other.
I mean, I can just see political disputes being resolved by the battle of the fish, the pickle fish. And whoever had the best recipe, gets to win, because we live in a time where there's so much division, Liziwe, and we see food in the way that Vashna's beautifully carved out that cartography, the food cartography of how food travels from one place to the next.
Yes.
It changes. We all celebrate. Suddenly our palates are excited by something new that we might not have tried before. Share with us from a chef's perspective and from a palate perspective why the sweet, the raisiny goes with something that's a little tangier and spicier.
With pickling, of course, we're going to use a lot of acidic. So to balance that, we will have to add sugar to it to mellow the flavors, and then the spices complement the flavors so much, because it's all about pickling. Pickling you can't use one and not use the other. If you're going to use acidic, you are going to need the sugar just to balance that. And it's a beautiful thing, especially in South Africa, because it's so diverse. We get to celebrate each other's cuisine, and we adopt them. You could come. It could be a Limpopo recipe. Now it's a South African recipe. So that's what I like. I love about the South African cuisine and our culinary. We experiment, and we are so diverse, and we enjoy every flavors, and we are open to even international foods alike.
I see you've got your book
Yes.
with you, and we always love to give you a little tiny cheeky opportunity to just quickly share what that is. But that's your dinner recipes that you have there. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. What do you see as the next step in the journey of the pickled fish, and as an experimental chef as well, because I know that you do experiment with flavors and different combinations, like Vashna was saying. Fusion food is very much a big deal in how we reinvent ourselves. So where do you see it going next?
I think we are going to respect pickled fish. It's a traditional dish. We are not going to mess it. We are still going to enjoy it in years to come. And it's exciting because of social media and food bloggers and influencers. We are experiencing more and more cooks coming into the market and wanting to experience our traditional dish. Maybe they will cause a fusion here and there, but I think we're going to respect our traditional dishes.
Vashna, I'm going to be cheeky with you as well. I mean, I don't know if your skills are limited to academics and books and history, but you get into the kitchen, and I'd like to pose a similar question to you as somebody who is, a food historian also in many ways. Do you see any changes to this gorgeous staple?
Well, I mean, I don't see a lot of changes. I think, the dish itself is quite varied compared. It's particular to families, it's particular to some communities, maybe a street somewhere, it's particular to the recipe. So I think that will continue, and that's amazing for it to continue. But what I hope to see is that we begin to imbibe much more pride in the food that we make, in the food that our mothers make, in the food that's made at home that we love. I mean, we're very happy to go to Woolworths and buy pickled fish that's coming to us from Norway, with the recipes from Norway, or even parts of, Europe and stuff. And we're very happy to do that. But we have those same traditions. And I think that, yes, we should enjoy it at Easter in particular, but perhaps think about ways about making it much more of a popular dish that's enjoyed as a sort of, contribution to the history of not just our culinary traditions, but also to the history of how people who came to this land and people who were in this land come together and really are able to create out of great hardship and difficulties, and especially women really create amazing dishes. So it's like, biltong is such an amazing sort of export of ours, and it's so popularly enjoyed. I hope we start doing that with far more of our dishes, including things like pickled fish.
And so, to answer my question, on the other side, do you get into, do you make a mean anything, pickled fish, Vashna?
I make lots of mean things, but I'm not
We're going to have to pair you with Liziwe for those recipes and for that skills transfer.
Yes, I can make you a great prawn biryani.
Oh, I'm coming to your house because I love prawn biryani, and I'll see your prawn biryani and raise you a lamb biryani, darling. But we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. Liziwe, you have to join us as well for all this. It really is wonderful to talk about food and to talk about the season. Talk to us as well about, do we have any other, we talk about pickled fish and hot cross buns in South Africa. It's become such a thing. Do we have other foods that sort of represent the season?
The season. I think all of the food actually do represent the season, because at first we are fasting, and then we eat very light if we do, and then we come to this big feast when we now celebrate the resurrection, and then we have our plates full. We have family-sized meals, and I think every dish from different African, as we are diverse as we are, as diverse families, how we celebrate it, our culture, it plays a big influence into that. For me, I would love to see salads on my table. I would love to starchy salads with a little bit carbs on them.
Like your potato salad?
Like your rice salad. It's still light, but it's filling. Yeah. I would love to see that on the table. I would love to see a little chicken go in, some roasting here and that. Let's not just hush into it, Let's take it easy and create a simple, easy meals for the Easter. Then we can grow from there.
By the way, I find some of the store-bought varieties hugely insulting. It's overly sweet and slimy, and I feel like, if people are testing it for the first time,
I haven't even tasted
the store-bought ones. It's just going to be, horrible.
Home-cooked meals are the best all the times. The flavors you can balance. You can balance your flavor, reduce your sugar, your vinegar, and cook it the way how would you prefer it. Yeah. Like I said, this is just a simple mild curry. You can go and add more spices if you want, or you can lose some. So yeah, I love throwing whole chilies in there because I think it just is lovely, and then you can kind of modulate the heat. With the pickle. Yeah. With the pickle, and instead of hot cross buns, my family normally has a very cold pickled fish with a hot bed of basmati rice and sprinkling of coriander, chopped coriander on the top. Yes, that's lovely. I love your family. Do I get started? Yes, absolutely. I love that. I know what I'm doing. Yes, I should be invited. It sounds so amazing. It sounds beautiful. That is a family meal I'm talking about. Well, I love it, Liziwe, and thank you so much. Our crew, I know, is going to really enjoy sampling this. Don't say I didn't get you anything for Christmas, crew. And that was Liziwe Matloha, who is a chef and internet personality, and Dr. Vashna Jagarnath, who is an historian. So thank you to both of you for being with us today and titillating our taste buds.